Hi, my name's Alan Brown. I'm a technologist and educator, and I'm also a professor in digital economy at the University of Exeter Business School. One of the most interesting things that I find when I'm talking to leaders and managers in organizations of all forms is the question of how has leadership changed in an organization going through significant digital transformation? What's the role of leadership? What are some of the challenges and constraints that we have to deal with? In those conversations, I've come to think about 5 key areas that I refer to as the key digital dilemmas that leaders and managers face in digitally transforming organizations. And I'd like to explain why I think these 5 dilemmas are so important. The first dilemma is what I'll call the value dilemma. How do we think about value in an organization that's changing significantly? What I mean by that is traditional views of value look at value as value in exchange. What that is I create something, I make it available to you, and you get the product or service, I get your payment. That's value in exchange. The move is towards value in use. Value in use says we don't create any value until you use the product or service. In fact, I may give away the product and service to allow you to use it. And then I may instrument your use so that I get payment for how much you use it, or when you use it, or the demand that was going on at the time that you chose to use it. That's the way, for example, organizations like Uber think about their surge-based pricing. They manage the supply and demand of service, and you pay per use for the ride of where you're going. That's also how Rolls-Royce sells aircraft engines. They don't sell the engine to Singapore Airlines. What they do is power by the hour. Singapore Airlines use the engine and pay for their use. There are many ways that that engine is then instrumented to understand its use and to make it available as often and as high quality as they can. So that shift towards that idea of value is a conversation, is a dilemma, if you like, that must be faced in all organizations. How do I think about my organization providing value in use when perhaps our business models, our way of working, our structures are around value in exchange? What does it mean for my salespeople who have a set of products, a territory, and a price plan, and want to sell as many as they can to their territory to make their quota and to get their bonus? And now I'm telling them to give the product away and then measure use. How does that work for my sales force? What does it mean for my marketing team? What do they say about the product? How do they position it? What does it mean for my servicing organization, my customer service? How do I think about how I respond to their needs, how I talk to them about the product, how I understand what repair means, how I think about the life cycle of those products? So we're starting to get organizations that are getting very conflicted about supporting today's business model around value in exchange and tomorrow's business model, value in use. So for leaders, they have to try to bridge this two, think about how things move between one and the other. So that's the first dilemma facing leaders. How do I think about value in a digitally transforming world? The second is we start to think about what productivity means. How do I measure the productivity of myself, my team, and the organization around me? What am I measuring? Am I measuring outputs? How much we create, how long they're here, how many things they create, how many calls they make, how many visits they make to clients? Or am I measuring the outcome of what they're creating? The value they create, the way in which they get feedback from their clients and partners, how they're perceived in terms of the relationship they create through the ecosystem that we're building. We're being asked to think about outcomes, but often we're measured in terms of outputs. And most of the ways in which all of the organizations I deal with look at performance is they measure those outputs. And yet they say, why aren't you being more inventive? Why aren't you introducing more new ideas? Why aren't you focusing more on the client? The answer is because I'm being measured on my day-to-day outputs, on the number of things I create, on the number of hours I spend, on the number of days I'm here in the office. So the second dilemma is a productivity dilemma. How do we begin to measure differently in a digital world where we're being asked to create new forms of value? The third area that I think is a dilemma is around data and data management, and particularly the ethics around data. We're starting to need and use data much more frequently than we ever did before. New data sources, new forms of information. That's about how I operate, about my clients, about their use of products and services, about what's going on in the factory, what's going on in the field, what's going on in the kinds of solutions that I'm offering. As we do that, we can invest in using that data to perhaps increase the use of those products, to tweak those products to provide new kinds of capabilities. But that leads us into some interesting challenges. As I'm learning more about the behavior of my employees, my partners, my clients, am I using that data wisely? Am I using it ethically? Or am I exploiting the information? Perhaps in ways that are not illegal, but perhaps are not necessarily in line with what those clients and employees might want. Obviously, monitoring in the workplace is a big conversation going on right now. Personal data management is another big conversation. What the legal implications are of sharing data. We've got many things that we're facing, and leaders need to increase their understanding of those challenges to operate in a digital world. The fourth area is really what leadership itself means. So as we're building teams, as we're operating in teams where perhaps we're thinking differently about how we interact with the client, how we learn, how we introduce new digital ways of working. As a leader, perhaps I'm feeling a little bit out of the loop. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit long in the tooth. You know, I've been here a while. I learned this way of working 20 years ago. I'm now the senior person in the organization. But more and more, what I know the job to be, how I grew up using these technologies, building these products and services, is not the way it's done anymore. I'm feeling a little bit like I'm a bit lost. And I think many leaders are feeling that. You know, starting to be the person that's the oldest person in the room isn't necessarily mean you're the most experienced in the way it's done today. That you understand what clients need, that you understand the relationships between different parts of your organization in the way that you need to move forward. So I think many leaders are feeling a little compromised right now. How do I work and operate in a world that's changing so fast? Where perhaps some of the values that I understood for the organization to be essential now have moved on a little bit. The way people think and work, how my clients want my products and services, how I interact with them. So leadership has moved. How do I think of myself in a leader in a digital world? What kinds of services do I provide? What kind of skills have I got? What kind of way of thinking? How do I work with my team? How do I perhaps even provide them with some of the decision making? And I cede that decision making to people closer to the clients, yet I'm still in charge. How does that work? So I think that's the fourth dilemma for me, is what does leadership mean in a digital age? The fifth and final dilemma is a human one. I think we're struggling right now with the use of digital technologies and its effect on us as humans, as individuals. Obviously, the obvious example is we're working in a very hybrid way, working at home, working in the office, working from Starbucks, working from all sorts of places where technology is always on, always around us. We're interacting with technology. You know, our emails are arriving all of the time. We're getting requests 24/7. We don't yet understand really how to operate in this digital world. People are getting very stressed. People are starting to not know when to switch off. People are starting to become very concerned about mental health and how our mental health and physical health is changing in this digital environment. This is not just a sideshow. This is really central to how we operate in a digital world. It's a key role of the leaders and leadership is to understand the effect on individuals, on our workforce, on our teams, to support those teams to go through these challenging times. Some folks find this a very easy transition, but many do not. And it's our responsibility to support and help them to move through this new way of working. So the final fifth dilemma for leaders is, how do I support my workforce moving to these new digital ways of working? How do I encourage them? How do I help them and support them? And how do I become sensitive to the kinds of challenges they'll face? These, for me, are 5 key, really important dilemmas we face as leaders, and addressing those will make you a better leader.